Hi everyone, I'm Chad. Welcome to Maker's Bench. A little over a week ago I received my first printer, the Prusa i3 MK2S. And so over the last week I've been working on getting it built. And so I went ahead and took video of the build process. I did time-lapse videos, and I stopped every now and then and tried to talk about each section of the build and how it went, and if there was any roadblocks or anything that I found that was whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the film, and then I'll come back at the end and I'll do a little wrap up on the things that I found and anything that I think that should be mentioned at the end, and then we'll close with that. So hopefully you'll enjoy this build of a Prusa i3 MK2 by someone who's never built a printer before. One thing I want to mention, I want to apologize for the focusing, the lighting, all those kinds of things that you're going to see on these videos. I was really excited to build this printer. I was, and I'm still new to video and editing and all these things that I'm trying to do. So when I went to make those videos you're going to see me talking to the camera and just trying to show what was going on, I was doing manually focusing stuff, and the lighting isn't that great and stuff. So I was just trying to hurry. I was just trying to get through it and whatnot. So again, I apologize for some of the camera, the focusing and some of the lighting and that type of thing, but I still think it's a fun video to watch. So time to build it. So I'm going to start some time-lapse videos, and I'm going to try to go through this as best I can. I'm going to stop when I need to and talk about what we're going with. The idea here is to have something so that somebody who hasn't done this before can see a little bit of the process. There's going to be time-lapse, so it's going to go kind of quick, but hopefully we'll be able to explain what's happening. So I'm going to unbox, get the parts organized, and then I'll stop and explain what we're going to do first. So enjoy. I've unboxed everything. I've got everything laid out in front of me. One of the things that's nice about this is all the packages are labeled, and the packages tell you what chapter of the instructions it's related to. So this book of instructions is obviously related into chapters, and so the first chapter is the y-axis, which is these two bags of parts here, and then some of the rods and stuff. But then there's the x-axis, the z-axis, the e-axis. You got your LCD, and then you've got PSU and heated bed, and then we've got the electrical stuff here, and then bag 9 has spares in it. So it's kind of nice. It's all laid out. I'm going to go chapter by chapter. So I'm going to start with chapter 2 here, the y-axis, and we'll start getting the base put together, and I'm going to do my best to keep it square, make sure it's square, and see if we can't get it put together well. So I'm going to go back to time-lapse. So we got the y-axis undercarriage basically put together. One of the things with the Prusa that I've been trying to do is, and I watched on some other builds, I saw that there was some kind of issue with this 100 millimeter length, and what it is there's this, they want 100 millimeters between the back of these feet, the orange blocks here, up to this, where the edge of this washer is on here. And if you're putting one together, you'll see in the instructions that they have that highlighted where they want that. So I was trying really hard to make sure that I have that 100 millimeters set right. I'm trying really hard to make sure this thing's square. And one of the things that you can do is you take a diagonal measurement from corner to corner. I'm using the inside of this notch on one side, and then the inside of the notch on the other. And when I do that right now, it looks like it's pretty square. So I'm excited about that. It looks pretty good, looks pretty square, and I'm going to keep going with the build. Hi everyone. So yesterday I worked on this build and I got the undercarriage here put together for the Prusa printer that I'm building. One of the things that happened to me yesterday, it's just a little thing, not a huge thing, but one of the things that happened was one of the things I had a little trouble with, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is and I'm going to have to use the manual focus here because having some issues with autofocus, still trying to get used to this camera. When I put this portion of the undercarriage together, it said to put the motor mount here somewhere in the middle. It said that position wasn't entirely, that it wasn't really critical at that point, and so I left it kind of in the middle where I thought it was supposed to go. And then when I put the mount on, if you look here, there's another plastic piece right here. This is a spacer that keeps the motor basically pulled up against and gives it a spot to rest against. So when I put those on there, and then when I put the carriage on, there's also, before I get to that, there's also a sensor here, and let me see if I can get that focused a little bit better. There's a sensor right here, and so what happens is when this comes down, the mount where the belt goes on the underside of the carriage, the mount comes down and let's see if I can find a way to get that on here. The mount will come in contact with that switch right there. But when I put it together, I had it too far over this way, and so what was happening was the belt holder, where the belt goes, connects to the undercarriage, it was actually hitting the motor. So I had to go back and move all of this over. I had to take the motor off and everything to get that to move over, because the spacer doesn't want to just slide. So I had to move all that over. Another issue I had, and this was my fault, I was really, the bearings on these rails, the bearings here on the rails they're mounted with the U-bolts. They're mounted with the U-bolts on the S. They got U-bolts instead of zip ties now. And so when I went to put those on, I really want this to be locked in. You know, I want my bearings locked in. I want it to glide smoothly. I want it to be precise as I can possibly make it. So when I put these on, the instructions say to tighten these with a needle nose pliers. All I read was tighten with needle nose pliers, and my head immediately went, I have a tool for that. So I ran up to the garage and I grabbed my 5.5 millimeter socket and a 1/4 inch drive, and I cranked these down nice and tight. I didn't finish reading the instructions because, you know, I'm a guy and I'm somewhat mechanically inclined, so that's what I do. I just kind of read what I have to and then do the rest myself. But of course, when I did that, I over tightened the U-bolts that are here, and when I did that, I deformed the bearings a little bit, and there was too much pressure on there, so the shaft wouldn't go in there. The bearings wouldn't go onto the shaft at all. So I had to loosen these up to get them on, and now I'm a little worried that this carriage is a little bit, I mean, it's loud, not terribly loud, I guess, but I feel like it feels a little off to me, and I'm pretty sure it's my fault. So one of the things that I did was today I ordered some new bearings, some replacement bearings. I'm not going to go ahead and wait for them to get here. I'm going to finish this out. I think these bearings are going to work fine. It is what it is, and I think it's going to be alright. I don't think there's going to be a problem with it. But I did order the other bearings, and I'm going to upgrade the bearings. So what I did was I ended up ordering the dryland bearings. They're not the roller bearings. They're just a slip fit bearing. Anyway, I'll go into that more when I do the bearing upgrade later. The thing about the bearings that I got, these bearings the overall diameter is 15 millimeters. The drylands that I've got, they're in a case as well, but they're 16 millimeters. So to do a total bearing upgrade anyway, I think I have to do something to the parts on the printer that hold the other bearings. I might have to open those holes up a little bit more, so I think I'm going to tweak the models and reprint them before I do that, but I don't know yet where we're going to be with that. So right now we're going to continue on with these bearings. I think we're okay, but just a note of caution when if you're building this printer, do not over tighten these. They do say, you know, to tighten to a certain point and then put a quarter turn on there, and that's what I didn't do. So but luckily I think they're still going to work, so we're going to go from there, and we'll get to building. Okay, well, I'm about 3 hours and 45 minutes into this build. Just finished up the x-axis. Here's what the x-axis looks like. It's this is chapter 3 of the install manual. You can see it's a couple of rails. There's the Z is going to run along through put bearings into each end here. So this will go up and down through the shafts here. And then we have our carriage here for the hot end and the printer unit there. So starting to come along. So just wanted to stop and say where I was at and go through that a little bit. The cabling has a nice little wrap around there. The motor's mounted on here as well. So this went together pretty quickly and pretty smoothly. So I'm gonna keep going. Got through the Z-axis, or the Z-axis, as you Europeans like to say, and some Canadians I know. So we got through the Z-axis last night. Finished up last night with that, and so the frame is put together. We got the Z-axis is going on. All the moving parts are in there. It looks like I think we're going to be getting on to electrical stuff today, and I'm going to continue with the build. So the build's going good. I'm about 4 or 5 hours into the build, so looking forward to getting going on the rest of this portion here. I'm hopefully we'll get her done soon. So back to the build. Taking a break again from the build. Got the hot end put together. So you can see the hot end has the extruder down here in the bottom. The hot end itself, the part that heats up and everything, is all up inside of here. The back end, there's the heat sinks and stuff from the hot end are inside the head, inside the body here. There's a fan on the side that's going to blow air through to cool off the heat sinks, and you can see there's another fan right here too that's going to blow onto the, there's a shroud that goes over the end of the fan, and that shroud is gonna, the air is gonna come out and blow right onto the extruder itself, the nozzle. And then of course you got your motor right here for the, that drives the filament. So the filament will come in through the top. There is a tensioner right here, and that tensioner, so everything is going to drive in. Let's see if I can get it close up here. Sorry about the focus. The focus I'm doing manually here, but anyway, there's the motor. It's got a gear on there that's got some teeth that'll pull the filament through. So kind of fun to put all this together and see how this stuff actually goes. Done a lot of reading about 3D printing, and they talk about the hot end and what's inside there all the time, and it's really nice to put one together so you actually get an idea what all is in here and what goes into this thing. So pretty cool. Very excited to finish putting it together. I'm going to put it, it's now time to mount this onto the frame there, so I'm going to get back to it. Alright, just finished another step in the assembly instructions. Just got the hot end finished being put together. So the hot end, that whole section was putting the hot end together and then mounting it and getting the cabling and stuff all wrapped up in one step. So I stopped after I got the hot end put together. We looked at that, and then so I mounted it onto the machine and we got the cables all wrapped. So that's good to go. So now I move on to the next chapter, the next stage of the assembly instructions, and it's the LCD screen. So we're getting there. A few more steps to go, and we're almost there. So gonna keep going. Hey everyone, so I stopped again last night. I did finish up the display. The LCD display got put on, and I think that was the last part that I did last night since I last updated. That went together pretty simple. It was pretty easy, straightforward. And there was some cable management stuff that got done, some zip ties, some clips, and things of that nature. I'm going to get going here on the next build, or on the next part of the build, which is the CPU. No, not a CPU either. It's a power supply. That's what it is. Power supply and the heated bed. So that's the next chapter, the next set of instructions in the process for building this Prusa. I also want to wish everybody happy May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. I'm wearing my Boba Fett shirt here in honor of such a day. That's what day it is here. I'm sure that's not going to be the case by the time you're watching it. I hope you had a good one. So, time to get back to the build. Okay, just finished up the last section there, the power supply and the heated bed. I thought for sure that was going to be the quickest, easiest part of the build so far. I was far from wrong. That was the longest one so far, and I had some problems. I had some issues. I don't know if you saw me over there a couple times. I was disappeared. It's because I was trying to find a bolt or a screw or a nut on the floor, and I carpeting and these little tiny screws. It's a good time. So the problem I had was where the power supply mounts on. There's a foot on that's attached to the part of the frame. I think it's on part of the frame. Let's see. Yeah. So right on the corner of the carriage, the main carriage where everything goes, this little foot is there, and the power supply comes down on top of it, and it you screw it in there, and underneath it there's some of those. They've got these little, a lot of hexagon shapes to put a nut in, and that's supposed to capture that nut, and then you put the screw in, and it grabs on that nut, and it you pull it and it tightens itself up. Well, on that one, I couldn't get the nut to go into the capture hole in a way that it would stay in there and lock itself in. So I tried holding it in with stuff, and I tried to thread that screw in there and thread that screw in there, and I couldn't get it. I had a really tough time. The instructions say that there's a tip, and one of the tips is to take a screw, a longer screw, and thread in a little bit of the screw, and then you put that into that hole, and you can tap on it and push that. It's supposed to push that nut into that capture hole so that it's locked in, and then you can unscrew the screw and it stays. And that worked for some of the things that I had problems with before, but this one, it just wouldn't. It was like there was no hexagon shape. It was just a clear, it was like a circle, just a cone-shaped circle that went in, and it wouldn't do it. So what I eventually did is I found out of the spares, I got a longer screw, one that went through farther than the piece, so it stuck out the bottom, and it had threads that went all the way back. So I put a longer screw in, I tightened that up, and then I got that nut started on there, and I kept turning it, and I got it pushed in. I used a screwdriver to hold it until it pulled itself in, and what I did was I used that screw to pull that nut into that piece. And so as you tighten it up, that nut pulls in, and it locked itself in place, and then I backed that long screw out, the nut stayed in place, and then I used the regular screw and I tightened it in, and it went fine. So just kind of a tip, if you're having a hard time getting a nut to come in, sometimes if you get a longer screw with a little bit more thread sticking out where you can get the nut started, you can just keep tightening it and it'll pull that. And sometimes it's easier to pull that nut into the spot than it is to try to tap on it and bang it in there. So that's what I did. And then we put the heated bed on. That went all right. We got that on. We got the cables wrapped up and tied on that. Then the last part there was making sure that the X-axis is lined up with the lines on the printed bed. Mine was a little bit off, and it tells you where to adjust it in the thing. So you got to use when you built the threaded rod frames there at the bottom, you got to unloosen some of those. And basically, the frame here, the black metal frame, when you put it on, it could either be one way or the other. So on one side, if you look where it's misaligned, you just got to loosen those nuts and move it over until it's all lined up right, and that way we have a nice square printing surface, and the axes are perpendicular to each other at 90 degrees. So that's that part of it. I think all that's left now is the control board, the Rambo board. So we got the one section left, so let's see if we can get her done tonight. Welcome back. So the last time lapse got cut off a little bit there at the end. Didn't mean to do that. It was just a little bit of the wiring, plugging in the wires and then closing the box was really all I had left to do, and I was concentrating on that. I didn't hear the camera stop with the picture taking, so I did good throughout most of the whole process. That was the only spot there where I kind of messed that up. So overall, the build went really well. I was very happy with the build. I'm really excited. I haven't plugged it in yet, and the reason I haven't plugged it in yet is because when I do plug it in, I'm going to film, and I'm going to actually go through that whole thing. It's not going to be time-lapse either. I'm going to film myself plugging it in, and I'm gonna film the the process of getting my first print to go. That's one thing that I haven't seen a ton of, is somebody new actually trying to get their first print to go. So that's what I plan to do. The build itself, I'm very happy with the build. The things I talked about in the video, the bearings. I did get my bearings in. It's kind of funny, I just got it all put together and the bearings came in. But there's some modifications that'll have to happen before I can put those bearings in. And the modifications, the shaft bearings here on the Z-axis, the hole that holds those bearings, I'm going to have to make that a little bit bigger, and I can do that. Also on the back of the hot end here, there's going to be, I have to make that a little bit bigger to take that bigger 16 millimeter bearing. But other than that, that should be a lot of fun to do, and I'm going to do a video on that bearing overhaul and how I do that. The only thing I would probably do differently while I was building it that might have got a little confusing was I talked about that Y carriage motor back here. What I would do, I think if I did this again, I would put the mount on and I would put the switch on, and once I would dry fit in the carriage, once the carriage and the bearings were put together, and I would pull that back. I don't think the motor and the spacer don't necessarily have to go on immediately. So I think that I would put the mount on and I'd get the pulley in there and all that kind of stuff. But then once the carriage, and that's not the heated bed, that's just once the carriage goes on, you can then tell where that mount has to go, because it lines up with the switch back there. So that belt and that holds all the belts together comes back and touches that switch. So once that's in there and the carriage is on, you can move the mount. Once the mount is in the right spot, then you can mount the motor and put the spacer in behind it. So that's probably how I would handle that. Like I said, everything else I think went together really, really well. So I'm very excited about the being done with it, and I'm looking forward to plugging it in and getting it going. So as soon as I get this video out, I promised myself I would get this video out before I did that one, because it'll make me hurry this up. So I'm gonna get going, and I'm gonna get this video done, and then I'm going to start trying to get my first print done. So and getting that footage and that film, so that we can get that out. So have a great day. We'll see you next time.